Today I'm going to show you how I paint my favourite army in the whole of the 40k universe, the Adeptus Custodes. This is designed as a speed paint, but it's also a paint job where you can scale it up for the character models to add in more details. These are the paints you're going to need. I'll put a list of them in the description below as well, or you can screenshot these if it makes it easier for you. For this tutorial, I also used an airbrush, super glue, plastic glue, cling film, blue tack, and some old sprue that I've cut up into straight pieces. I used the Citadel holder, and I use Rosemary & Co brushes, and I also use the Rivalcraft base toppers for our bases. We'll talk about those later. I've put some links to the products I use in the description below. These are all affiliate links, so if you do order something through them, it won't cost you anything extra, but it does give a little bit back to me, which obviously helps support the channel. Obviously, the first thing we're going to do is crack open the box, cut out pieces and clean them up. I realised after I started recording that I'd already used the spear I wanted, so I had to use one from the Horus Custodians, which are the Custodes Terminators. It doesn't look too out of place, I don't think. It's just a little bit big, but it doesn't matter. I think it looks okay. Before we build the model, we're going to put the head, shoulder pads and tacits to one side because it makes base coating those easier. A little tip for building the Custodes: there's a lot of joints which are flat faces being stuck together. You can make these easier by just cutting some small lines into the flat surfaces with your hobby knife. This makes the plastic glue work faster and better because there's a higher surface area. So we're going to super glue the shoulder pads, tacits and head to those spare pieces of sprue that I talked about earlier. Be careful not to use too much glue because you don't want to get it onto any of the details and ruin those. Try and get it just onto the inside of the shoulder pads, the bottom of the neck and the back of the tacits. We're also going to super glue the custodian to a spare base, which just makes them easier to paint using one of the Citadel holders. We're going to want to prime everything in black. You can use any black primer really, it doesn't matter that much. I use a mix of Vallejo Model Air Black, gloss varnish and thinner. It goes on really well, it doesn't obscure any details and it dries with a slightly glossy, tough finish. The glossy finish doesn't really matter in this case. It might make the metal shine a little bit more, but probably not. What I usually use that for is so that I can find the light reflections on models before I paint them. But that's a topic for another video. I probably use 1 part varnish to 2 parts thinner to 4 or 5 parts black. After priming, we're going to use Vallejo Duraluminium. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but I don't know. So that's what we're going with, Duraluminium. And we're going to use that on the body and the head of the custodian. And then we're going to use Vallejo Gold for the shoulder pads and tacits. You want to go for a few thin coats so that it gives it a nice even finish across the whole model. We'll put the airbrush away for now, but we'll come back to that later. And we're going to give all the metallics a wash. For the shoulder pads and tacits, we use Reikland Flesh Shade, and we're just going to let it pool in the recesses, but not excessively. For the body and helmet, we're going to use Skeleton Horde and paint all the metal armor sections, except for these little cable things and the vents on his back. For those, we're going to use Basilicanum Grey. Next up, we're going to paint all the gems, pipe, hair, spears, armor joints, these little tassel things. We're going to paint those all in black. Any black's going to do. Again, it doesn't really matter, but the Vallejo Model Colour Black is the one I use just because it's got a really good coverage, and if you're speed painting, you don't want to spend ages doing loads of thin coats. The last part before we get on to some really fun stuff is we're going to paint all the leather areas with Mournfang Brown. So that's the gloves, the little flappy skirt bit and his belt. And then we're going to give those areas a wash with Nuln Oil. Before we get on to the next bit, why don't you let me know what your favourite metallic recipes are in the comments below. And whilst you're there, if you wouldn't mind giving me a like and hitting the subscribe button and the bell button and the share button, that would be really great. Thank you. Okay, so with that little bit of begging out of the way, grab your piece of cling film and you're going to want to wrap it around the whole model, leaving just the blade of the spear exposed. Try and get really tight around it because we're going to be using the airbrush and we don't want any overspray getting onto the rest of the model and ruining what we've already done. Once that's wrapped, we're going to use the Vallejo Game Air Magic Blue with a few drops of thinner added in. We're going to start at the tip of the spear and sort of feather thin layers of blue down towards the bottom of the blade so that we get this nice black to blue gradient as it goes up the blade, ending in blue at the top. Then we're going to add some white into that mix, and we're going to do the same again, but just don't feather down as far. So you end up with this black to blue to light blue gradient. And finally, we're going to clean out the airbrush and add in some pure white and just feather that tip of the blade so it now goes black to blue to light blue to white. Now we're going to add some extra details to the blade, and we want to aim for like a starry night effect. So sticking with the white that's in the airbrush, we're going to drop the pressure right down, which isn't something we'd normally do because it's going to cause spattering, but that is exactly what we want. So drop that pressure down and test it out on a piece of paper just to make sure that the paint is spattering, and then we're going to spray it off to the side of the blade, not directly onto the blade because obviously that's just going to spray white spattery paint all over it. But if you do it off to the side, then those speckles will just catch on the blade and it'll create that starry effect. Now we can remove the cling film, and we're going to pick out some of the details on the spear with the vallejo gold using a brush and give it a wash with Reichel and Fleshshade. The vallejo metal colours are really nice on a brush as well as through the airbrush, but they do wick into a brush quite quickly, so you're going to want to make sure you clean your brushes out really thoroughly after using them. Last thing, paint some Blood Angels red into the eye lenses, and now we can glue all the parts together and work on the base. Usually I would build something a bit more extravagant like my Gloomy City bases, but for speed painting, these base toppers from Rival Crafts are absolutely perfect. They do a really wide range of different settings. I'm using the Arid Plains toppers for my Custodes, and all I do is pop them in the fridge for half an hour or so to harden the glue up a bit, peel them away from the paper, pop it onto the base, and then super glue the model down. They're really quick and easy to use, and I just love them. I've put an affiliate link to them in the description below as well, so if you want to check those out, that'd be great, and as I said before, it would give a little kickback to me, which is obviously really appreciated. And there we have it, one Custodes is done. It's what I like to think of as a nice tabletop standard, so you can push it further if you want to. You can always pick out some extra highlights or more details here and there, but I think for a tabletop, gaming standard, and it's pretty quick as well, it's a pretty good easy job. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've got any questions, please let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer those. And if you could give it a like and subscribe, that would be great as well.